Divorce Redditors, what is the craziest thing you or your former spouse did after divorce? She called my company, talked her way up the chain to the president of the company. Still don't know how she managed that, but she's smart, and told him I was suicidal and had threatened to do something drastic at work. Later I learned that she thought this would be a roundabout way of getting my address, which I didn't share with her after I moved out because she's batshit crazy. We were still in divorce proceedings when my ex moved in a woman and her 2 kids. He'd only known them for 2 months. Then, her mom moved in shortly thereafter with her 2 dogs. The house was pure chaos and my daughter slept in a closet when she went there, because the girlfriend's kids got to take over the big bedroom. And surprise, surprise, the relationship crashed and burned within a year. Good riddance. Not me but myself. His ex-wife got married a few days after receiving the court's final decision on the annulment of marriage case. In our country, we don't have divorce. Well, okay, he has moved on already. Now her new husband plans to have his marriage to her annulled too. This was from even I was a kid and my parents were going through a divorce. My dad was a total sociopath, manipulative, physically and emotionally abusive, drug dealing, the whole 9 yards. Even my mom was finally able to get out. He still had visitation rights. His family kept on bugging my sister and me, still under 10 years old, to try to convince my mom to talk to him. She finally did try to talk to him when she came to pick us up at the police station from where it was agreed to meet when he had his time with us. They immediately got into an argument. He started throwing one of his temper tantrum, grabbed my mom in front on a cop from the LAPD trying to beat her. Then the cop grabbed him. He let go of my mom with a look of pure terror on his face. I think that was the day I realized he was sociopathic and didn't want anything else to do with him and his crazy-ass Bible-thumping family. Prior to divorce, he established a pattern of asking me to sleep with someone else, usually MFF threesomes, usually friends of his, mine, ours, getting increasingly demanding, moody until I conceded, then reacting with extreme insecurity, jealousy, possessiveness, and need for reassurance afterwards until it happened again. It destroyed me as well as all of my in-person friendships, and I still don't understand why he needed to go through that psychodrama over and over, or why I didn't leave sooner. Shortly before I filed for divorce, he broke into my apartment twice, once because he wasn't done talking and then because the apartment complex director told him I couldn't legally kick him out of the apartment, sexually assaulted me while I was sleeping, called the cops and DCF because I blocked him on Messenger after close to 24 hours of non-stop texting from him, and chose to publicly throw a couple of punches and an energy drink at the still concussed TBI survivor he'd chosen as my most recent sex partner, as if any of this was that person's fault. Then he assaulted me in the backyard while refusing to leave, and told the police I had attacked him. I filed a restraining order and divorce on the same day. 4 months after our divorce was finalized and he was granted full custody of our 3 kids for every school vacation, he decided to move halfway across the country to live with his mother. She's still taking care of him. His kids aren't particularly interested in talking to him and haven't seen him in over a year. I offered to pay for him to stay here over the summer so he could see them, but he said nah. The cops, lawyers, Office of Child Support employees, and the judge have all responded the same way to his endless victim spiel. A tired sigh, a roll of the eyes. He continues to think his situation is everyone else's fault and totally unique. He follows me here, and has quoted some of my posts in court. Hi Brian, Ada, thanks for the upvotes. Let me know if you've had a similar experience. He's texted to call me a lying whore yet again. I've invited him to respond here, or please quit stalking my social media, as I've asked, or accept that we have different ideas of how things went, but we'll see. My ex-husband messages, calls me every November. Our divorce was finalized November 2015. Last time I decided not to answer because I'm in a committed relationship, but every year, like clockwork, our divorce was messy to say the least, and after our final court hearing we stood outside for like an hour talking about his girlfriend problems. I guess he just needed a friend, but I don't anymore. At least, I don't need him as a friend. Told everyone I was physically abusive at the time, and now ... I'm not intimidating in any way. It didn't come out until 2 years later when she needed to change something in our agreement but couldn't unless I agreed. I made her tell her family that it was something she said when she was mad. Her mom apologized to me for saying things at the time. We are friends now, have a son together, so it's best. But goddamn, I hated her guts for 5 years during the divorce, but after separating, my friend's ex tried to claim less assets than he really had, but she was dropping the kids off one day and found retirement fund statements sitting on the kitchen table, despite claiming that they had been using his income for living expenses and hers was going into savings. Somehow he managed to tuck away over $1 million into those two funds, under his name only. When she brought it up with the lawyer, he claimed that had just forgotten to put those on the list. She would stalk my Reddit account and angrily text me if she didn't like my posts talking about her cheating on me. I came home from seeing my grandmother on her deathbed and found she had cheated. She also texted me accusing me of sabotaging her attempts to get a job that requires a security clearance. Apparently it was my fault and not the fact she had already been denied a security clearance for mental instability. Continuously texted at all hours threatening suicide. I would rush over to do a welfare check and he'd open the door with a smile. "Hey, since you're here, want to come in for a beer?" Sex? Hard pass. Starting upping it. I rush over, he's nowhere to be found. I'm calling his parents, friends. Turns out he was just at a bar. Another time he left a funeral playlist, a note, disappears off the face of the earth for almost a day, reappears so drunk he almost ran into the house. After that, I just couldn't take it anymore. So the next time he started texting, I warned him that I would call the police if he was being serious. But I wasn't coming to check. He went 0-100 real quick about how he'd be dead before they got here, etc. So I called them. He ended up getting 5150 for the night, very upset with me the next day, demanding a ride and so on. I hung up, called his mom, said not my mess anymore, here's the address. So then he just found new ways to torture me for a few years, but that one stands out the most. Part of our agreement during separation was that he would drive the paid-for car, and I would drive the car we were making payments on still. The payments went through his account. They would post and he would send me screenshots. Even though they would post, he specifically told his bank to not let them go through. And one day, as I was getting ready to go to work, a shitty serving job to make ends meet, I walk outside and the car was gone. At first I thought it was stolen and I called the cops. Nope, it had been repossessed. I called him and he basically said that's what I deserved. The paid-for car was in my name though, so I scooped that up under police surveillance, so he wouldn't do any other nefarious shit. And now he drives a pass car that can barely make it through red lights, and I have two very nice cars with my new spouse. I started to use heroin and meth. A couple of years after divorce, I was off the deep end and running amok. I got arrested with a mobile pharmacy on me and found myself in gaol. I bailed out facing multiple felony charges. A week after bailing out, I went into a year-long rehab. I continued to fight my case after completing the year in rehab by volunteering for another 4 months. I got things reduced to misdemeanors and working on getting record expunged. It's been a wild 6 years. I am clean for over 4 years. Woo. My coworker finally got divorced after 2 years of trying to work it out with her hubby. She had a disabled child that her ex refused to help with and pay child support. She decided to sell her engagement ring, diamond wedding band and several pieces of jewelry her ex gave her over the year and that she was able to keep after the divorce. Every gem was fake. Her jeweler told her that gems has been recently swapped out for fakes. So the 2 years she was working it out with her ex, he was replacing all her jewelry with fakes. My ex-husband started dating his stepmom, who has been in his life since he was 11 years old. His stepmom and him are still together almost 5 years later. His stepmom confessed her love of my ex to his dad a few years ago and they have since divorced. The dad is now dating a 21-year-old. I know all of this because I'm still close friends with my ex-husband's sister. It's so messed up and I'm so grateful I left him when I did. We divorced because I am gay. Afterwards she remarried twice. Her second husband, Jack, died, and she remarried for the third time total, including me, to Randall, who was her worst choice of all. She finally ran him off. We decided to vacation together to New England, Montreal, and Quebec City to check some states off my list of states I have visited. All of them, by the way, except Hawaii. We did the trip like a survey course in that we spent one night in many different towns and cities. For instance, we spent one night in Millinocket, Maine, and we climbed Mount Katahdin the next day. Later we took an 11-day cruise to Alaska together in 2005. We divorced in 1981. My ex died in 2009 of cancer. Of course there were painful times and heartaches associated with our divorce after 18 years of marriage and the birth of 2 sons. But time can heal a lot of wounds and former spouses can appreciate the part of the journey they took together even when they have moved on to their next adventure. He threatened to kill me, so I took out a VPO. He violated it on a Friday before a holiday, went to jail, then spent his one phone call asking me to drop the charges. Nope. If he frightened me enough to take out the VPO, then felt confident enough to violate it, why would I drop it? They let him out Tuesday, after the holiday. And he had the nerve to call me and ask me to drive him home. Nope. Again, my crazy thing was, I had a panic attack in the grocery store, the only one I've ever had. It was pretty scary. The manager was really kind, though. My ex has done a shit ton of weird stuff, thankfully most of it not aimed at me. While we were separated and working on our divorce, he would come whine to me about relationship issues with my cousin, with whom he'd had an affair and for whom he'd left me. Mind you, he'd moved in with not just her but her common-law husband, and then was upset by how many other boyfriends she had. This is my cousin who has more baby daddies than she has babies. 2 of her offspring are simultaneously half-brothers and cousins. She's never been known for her monogamy, in other words, but he claimed to have been in love with her since they were children. And this was magically supposed to make her return his affections. Among the best witnessed from a distance bits of this nonsense were him getting jealous of her visiting her husband and running her off the road in his work van, and generally hanging around screwing her instead of taking jobs, to the extent that there were trainees making more money than he was after he'd been there more than a year and he was eventually invited to resign or be fired. Then there was the time he was doing armed security and, angry at how taking our children on a first date to Austin, he expected to be allowed to stay over at this woman's apartment with his children and her children, and she was rightly horrified as the whole thing didn't go over well. Had an argument with his girlfriend at the time, not my cousin, but the ex-wife of a different cousin, and drove to her house in his work vehicle to threaten her with a gun. This resulted in a firing, a restraining order, and loss of his right to carry a gun. Then there was the girlfriend who insisted that if he really loved her, he'd move into the homeless shelter with her, so he fabricated being kicked out of his parents' house and spent the requisite month sleeping outside on the shelter's patio before intake, then spent years longer than the relationship living in the shelter, only finally leaving to move in with a woman he'd met a month earlier, after ostentatiously asking our children's permission. As you can imagine, they felt they had no choice. Basically, it's been 13 years of reeling from one relationship to the next, all overlapping, and the kids pulled into them from the very first second. He's currently trying desperately to find another girlfriend to move in with, as the current one is kicking him out to move to Virginia with a new boyfriend of her own, this after some time of subjecting the kids to loud arguments over his porn addiction and their dead sex life, and naturally blaming me for the fact that his two oldest children both refuse to talk to him at all. Two of my shortcomings as a wife, by the way, were being too classy. He quoted Confederate Railroad to me, and not providing the drama he felt requisite in a relationship. After he realized I was never going back, he told his mom that I had been stealing from the family the whole time we were together. Then he literally put it in writing that I had a key to his parents' home and would sneak in and take his dad's guns and his grandmother's jewelry, and that he had been powerless to stop me. It was always his druggy sister, always. Anyone with eyes could see it, but no one in this family wanted to believe it. Final straw that led to the divorce: got drunk and drove her car into the middle of the desert, sent her friend a picture of the GPS and said I didn't love her so I wouldn't come and look for her. She wouldn't answer my calls but kept calling her friend saying I didn't care. I looked for 2 hours before going back home because I needed to work in the morning. She came home and started banging things around and came into our room and threw her phone at me saying I didn't love her, punched me in the face multiple times and went to jail. After I filed for divorce she lost it. CPS wouldn't let her kids stay at the house because of the DV charge against her, so they stayed at her parents'. She purposely stayed at the house so that I couldn't see my kids. I refused to be alone with her after for fear that she would hurt herself and blame me, so I always went to the house with someone if I needed anything. She got tired of this and decided to just remove everything from the house while I was at work. I mean everything that wasn't in my kids' bedrooms she took out of the house. Curtains, ceiling fans, all of the furniture minus the dining table that I don't think she had room for. I thought, well, this sucks, but at least she's gone, so I changed the locks. She broke in and stole the locks the next day while I was at work, left nothing but the holes in the doors to swing open and the wind. Took the window locks, cut the power cord to the garage door opener, took the blender that I borrowed from my mom and popped the air mattress that I borrowed to sleep on. Then she flipped off the main breaker to the house, swore to the judge that someone else must have done it. After years of telling me she wanted a child, that she wanted to be a mom, that her life's dream was to be a Sam, she got pregnant with the first guy she slept with while we were getting divorced and put the kid up for adoption even before it was born. This was a long-standing thing with her. She always wanted something: car, house, dog, cat, marriage, etc., and the second she got it she immediately hated it. Wife cheated on me. When I confronted her, she grabbed a kitchen knife and threatened me. I told her to go ahead. She put it in my chest just deep enough to draw blood and cut down to my belly button. I hit her on top of her head. She fell to the ground. I left and, after signing papers, never saw her again. It's been 24 years now. We were living in a different state and she wanted to move back to her home state a year into our marriage. I really had nothing tying me down in that state, so I was down for moving if that's really what she wanted. It had been about 6 months into the move and she cheats on me with a coworker while I was working full-time and trying to finish up my bachelor's degree. She tells me that she didn't feel the same way about me and that she needed to move out to do some thinking. It's driving me insane trying to think about what could have gone wrong. I had a suspicion about that coworker, but I didn't have any proof. I checked our phone account online and sure enough they were talking every night after work while I was out working. I followed her one time and sure enough she was going to this guy's house. I confronted her about it and she finally fessed up.